think about your next career only when you are on top of one career or you accomplish yourself or achieved some kind of financial stability. I guess that I was lucky enough in this regard also. And also I started to practice meditation, and I'm not a Buddhist, but I started to learn Buddhism, and it really amplifies the understanding that we're all connected.
So how does one incorporate Ikigai into their life?
When I came across Ikigai at the first time, it really made sense to me that I was lucky enough to be able to achieve three parts of the four parts of Ikigai very naturally, very easy. I made money from something that I felt that I'm good at, and also I felt that I love to do. You not necessarily can be passionate about something that you're good at, and vice versa. But I was lucky enough to incorporate these three elements in my life.
Hello, innovators. I'm Dustin Miller, PolyInnovator. Today I'm talking with Itamar Bar. He is a strategist, master diver, musician, co-founder at Jorny, a movement for lifetime growth. Thank you for joining me on the POLYCAST.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Justin.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I know that even when we talked the last time too, we were nerding out, but like diving and just being in the water. So there's going to be funny things we can go into. The way I like to break the ice is to have you share something about yourself that no one knows about you.
Oh, wow. No one knows about me. I'm scared of water.
Really?
I am.
Okay, that's kind of counterintuitive considering you're a diver. So how does that work out?
I've struggled with anxiety throughout my open water and advanced open water, and at some point I realized that I can grow from it, and I still carry it with me a little bit. At points I experience it, even underwater, and even sometimes even thinking about going to dive. Definitely when I'm out there, I'm also a skipper. So sometimes I'm sailing and, being very far from land out there at the sea. Even if you are like over the sea, still
in the sea.
Anxious.
Is it like thalassophobia, where it's like something big in the water, or is it just the sea itself?
It is the infinity of the sea, I guess, being so infinite and so big and so deep. I always dream of think of submarines, coming from the bottom of the sea, or like giant sharks, stuff like that. But I'm good with that. I can handle it, and I definitely spend a lot of time above and under the sea, and on the beach, and in any capacity possibly there is.
You're definitely a shining example of like overcoming your fears and trying to make sure you have that growth in life.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I like that. I didn't know that about you too, especially since we were talking about it last time. And it's interesting to think about how, considering how much time you're being in the water, how do you feel? Obviously it's not the same, but how do you feel in the like swimming pools or any kind of body of water on land? Is it still kind of fear, or is it just like
mostly from mostly the sea?
Okay.
I do swim in swimming pool a lot, but I guess that the sea itself holds this like mystic power over me, which I like. On the other hand, I like and I respect, and I'm fearful of.
Go into the first question here. What was your mindset 5 years ago, and how have you changed since then?
I guess that my mindset 5 years ago, having COVID and so many things happening in the last couple of years, even less than 5. It changed a lot, but in the sense of our new business or new concept, I guess that the main change was that I've started to feel old. Coming from an industry, digital marketing industry, I'm an owner in one of the agencies in Israel. Been here for 20 years. Always was like the guru, the innovation guru, always talking about what's next. And at some point, I guess it was like 4 or 5 years ago, really, still being very successful in what I'm doing, I started to feel that I'm like not the most innovative, youngest, knows-it-all person in the room, which was very strange for me because for 20 years I was that. And I started to feel that it's just less interesting in some respect, who's like the new influencer or what's like the newest trend on TikTok, which was something that I was really, a pioneer at. And all of a sudden, age went down strongly in my agency and in general, and digital media grew a little bit older in business in other business aspects. So it really changed my mindset towards, like, it was very obvious for me that I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. We were very successful in this business wise, and with all the rest. But at some point, I realized about 5 years ago that it's not gonna be my thing forever, and I was starting to think about, like, what's gonna be next for me. And one thing that I knew is that I'm gonna, other than like correcting or adjusting different aspect in my personal and my business career, I really wanted to also do something that I can look forward with and really think for the longer future.
It's definitely thinking about the big picture and just different careers you might have throughout your life. Because even if you're focusing on the same industry, you might change what you're doing. You might go into a more teaching role or something like that. And it's always an interesting kind of process. But like you said, you're going to stay in it because that's just who you are. You like this industry,
Yes.
especially innovation.
Yeah, especially innovation and digital marketing, which is really I mean, it always stays very young. You always like the latest trend and very early adoption of things, and really being on top of all the trends and all the innovations. Some of them are turning to be like fads, but you always have to keep up, with everything that's going on. And there's so
Yeah.
many things going on. You have to have the passion to really be like in the front line always. And at some point, you get tired. I guess it comes with age. One of those things that you just start to realize that you're not going to have the same passion to do stuff forever.
It's kind of like looking in a future mirror for me because that's always kind of how it's been for me as well. Where I was on Vine and Musically and all these other social platforms early on, Mastodon, even now when it comes to like these Web3 platforms. And even now, I'm still looking at like Blue Sky and all these newer ones that are coming out. And I'm trying to think, okay, I don't really want to have a full on strategy for these, but how can I like cross post my tweets or threads over to these platforms and just so I can be on there at the very least. So it's just kind of
Right.
funny.
Fine. You just reminded me of
Yeah.
that.
Well, and it's crazy because there's one app called Yup. I think it's Yup. Yup. YUP.io. And right now they don't have threads. I don't think any platform technically has threads yet because the API is weird. But once that launches, it's going to be a madhouse. But they have Blue Sky, Twitter, Farcaster, I guess too, or something like that. They have all the blockchain ones, but then are also going to get threads and Twitter. And it's just interesting how you could cross post to all of them at once. So anytime you wanted to make a tweet, you could do all 5 platforms at once. And I think that's going to be key. Syndicating. Yep. Just how to throw it out there. Given your passion for music, what sparked that love for music? Mm-hmm. Mm. It definitely, you grew up around it kind of thing. What sort of instruments do you play and what genre do you prefer? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Avicii, Kygo, all that jazz. That's interesting too, and being able to have that innovative mindset with music and combining different genres together, I feel is really exciting. It is. I keep planning out like what music I want to make down the line because that's a future phase that I want to do, and thinking about like, okay, if I combine epic music with this genre, like pop or something like that, what would that sound like? Because there's no one doing some stuff like that at this point, and trying to figure out what genre mixes have not been done yet. So you have extensively traveled all throughout your life, and even worked for an airline at one point. What do you recall being your strongest memory from traveling? Mm, yeah, mm, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's awesome. How did you adapt to different languages? Yeah. And of course, you could always communicate through music too. Yeah. Given your travels, your music, your passion for life, it's obvious why Journey kind of came across your path. What inspired Journey, though, in your words, and the enrichment of older people's lives? Yeah, that's awesome. Because one thing we talked about when we had our personal call on Journey the other day was Ikigai. So, how does one incorporate Ikigai into their life? Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Yes. And it's interesting too because I think you're unique in the sense that you found three naturally. I think one or two is pretty common, but having three is one of those areas that's like, okay, like you're very close to that fourth one. And it's interesting too to think about how when you're young, you are able to impact the world. Like we see it all the time with some people who are great speakers and people who've done it around the world. But unless you are working completely towards global change in that sense, you're not necessarily going to have a global impact when you're young. At least that's what I've seen. You can, but it's not generally what happens. Generally, what happens, you find what you're good at. You spend that time on your own introspection. Like, what are you good at? What do you enjoy? A lot of people actually just force themselves through college and don't figure out what they enjoy. So they get into the middle of their life before they even realize what they actually like. And then the global thing happens. Like global, like what can I do for the world kind of thing happens. It's interesting how it's not a 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of thing because you can start from any part of the Ikigai, but it is interesting how that there's a common trend, I guess. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Something that just came to mind when you were saying that is that when it comes to different generations, back in the Industrial Revolution, like the 1920s or so, it seemed like a lot of people were thinking about the global, like, oh, I want to change the world. I want to do this to change the world. But then over the next 80 years, that kind of dwindled down a little bit. Sure, there was that pickup with the whole space race and stuff like that, changing the world in that frontier. But once we got to the moon, people just kind of stopped doing that and went back down to not really wanting to change anything. But now we're seeing in the 2020s kind of rise again. So 100 years later, that's this is something I just thought of just now. That was kind of interesting. We do. And even the Dalai Lama themselves have said that Buddhism is not a religion. It doesn't replace whatever religion you have. It's more of like an add-on. It gives you more spiritual practice, I guess you could say, that you might not normally have. Like depending on which religion you have your own spiritual practices, but this gives you a chance to meditate without any particular alignment. How important is meditation, do you think? Yeah. I love that. And when you were speaking about that, it kind of reminded me of time back in the day. I'm surprised how long it's been since I've done this, but I haven't worked in the pool in quite a long time. But meditation isn't necessarily about emptying your mind. You don't have to have an empty mind. Your mind's going to come up with different things. It's about just coming back to that center, that focus, rather than letting your train of thought trail out, as you know, but just for the audience sake. And it's interesting to think about how in the pool, in the water, it can be very meditative. So there's a hot tub at the place I worked at, and I would often go underwater and sink down in the hot tub and just be basically in a sound deprivation chamber, if you will, because there was no sound around me. There was sound in the air, but in the water, it was nothing. I'll turn off the jets and just kind of sit in peaceful relaxation. But even when I was sitting in the air, I could hear the water from the water slide rushing down like a waterfall. And it was interesting how all that noise, even the people talking and like yelling and all that jazz, it kind of just faded out. And I just focused on that waterfall sound and just kind of focusing on that piece. Yeah, yeah, mhm, yeah. And paying attention to it too. One thing that I don't mention too often on the show, but when I started doing interviews, I knew most of the podcasting skills, like how to actually do the interviews, how to prepare for them, all this basic stuff that people usually have a hard time learning. What I did not know very well was how to listen, how to shut up and listen. And as even as you probably know from these limited experiences with me, I like to talk a little bit. And I want these interviews to be around you. Sure, it's a conversation. I'm going to add to it, like I am now, obviously, but it's one of those things where I wanted to emphasize your life. That's the whole point of the interview. So I needed to learn how to shut up and listen. And throughout these interviews, out of the 130 or so that I've done so far, I'm still just getting started. I've had to actively practice and actively sit there and focus on making sure I'm in the moment, listening to what you're saying, making sure I'm taking in what you're saying. And that way, if something that sparks up in my head while you're talking, put it on the side burner for now, focus on the situation. If it's important, it'll come back. Thank you. Appreciate you. Something I ask all my guests is, what is a polymath to you? Okay. So polymath is the original idea why I came up with this show. right? I started creating my own content around this idea of being a polymath. A polymath is someone with 3 or more disciplines, particularly specialized levels. So a multi-specialist, if you will, with an insatiable curiosity. So that's the kind of baseline definition. Usually I try not to give the definition, but if people don't know, obviously you don't know, so it's fine. But what does that mean to you? Mm-hmm. Yeah, t-shirt marketer and whatnot. Hmm. Interesting. While there's some points I agree, there's some points I disagree with that too. It's interesting to think about how there's not enough people who know about the T-shaped marketer kind of. I say marketer. Most people associate the T-shaped person with marketing, but T-shape can be applied to any skill. The wide-ranging jack of all trades, multidisciplinary understanding while having that singular specialization. If you think of a specialist as just one line, a T-shape as the T 2 lines, a polymath would be like a sideways E. So you have the line with 3 lines. While the 10,000 hours is a good baseline, even Malcolm Gladwell, who popularized it, actually kind of went back on his thoughts on that because of David Epstein, his friend who wrote a book on generalists. It's interesting how, depending on how well you practice, deliberate practice versus more basic practice, you can actually become a master of a skill at 8,000 hours. But it takes a lot of really, you need a good coach, for example. You need to have like very optimized learning. Whereas some people might not learn very optimized, and it might take them 12,000 hours to learn something for one skill. The one thing that you mentioned too was that the T-shape takes in all the different areas and to bring it into their main structure. They can understand the wide ranging and pull from that and understand their main area more. That also helps with learning multiple different disciplines too, which is interesting. Yeah. Plus, it takes time. That's the first half. It continues, but oftentimes better than a master of one. Which is interesting because a lot of people don't know that's a broken sentence there. Because you were trying to say the. Sorry, let me finish what your thought was. Sorry. That is true, especially since a lot of time, if you spread yourself too thin without a certain focus, it can definitely hinder your progress. It is interesting though. I didn't mean to interrupt you there. I just got excited. The interesting thing of that phrase is that, like you said, a lot of people forget. Like they say the first part, jack of all trades, and it gets exciting about it. Oh, I can do many different things. But then, as you said, people forget master of none because they're not spending time focusing. But that phrase is only half of the actual full phrase, jack of all trades, master of none, but oftentimes better than a master of one. And it goes back to what you were saying earlier, where you're pulling from many different areas. And because of that trans-contextual thinking, it actually makes you more valuable as a employee or an individual than just a pure specialist, because you can have many different points of view. Point of the show, I guess. I didn't mean to go into there, but I was just thinking, you're very multidisciplinary. Given your multidisciplinary life, how do you manage your time? How do you get through all these different things? Traveling, music, work. Mm. Mhm. Mm. Yeah. Mm. Mm. Oh, interesting. Mm. Right. I find what you said very fascinating when it comes to time blocking, because that's an issue that I've been facing for years. One example that I've only really told, I think, one guest about this at one point is that back in like 2016 or so, I remember being overwhelmed by all the different habits that I wanted to do. Duolingo for language learning, exercise, meditation, regular just course learning, something like that. And then on top of that, building a business and trying to do everything else I was trying to do and work. And trying to balance all my time seemed so inefficient, and it seemed like out of the question. Like I wouldn't be able to do it. And then as the years went on, certain things became habits. I lost certain habits. Reading was another one that I gained and then lost. And so what you were saying there was really interesting, especially since the past few weeks. I don't know if it's because of the time of year, which is hard on me, but I've been pushing back everything. Like I've been having different interviews that I need to get out last week. I pushed back by a day, pushed back by a day. All these different tasks that I need to do, they're piling up now. I'm like looking at my calendar and like now they're piling up. So it's interesting that you're saying that, and I can learn definitely a lot from you, from what you were saying there. Taking the time too to also spend time with family is something that I try to do. Even though I'm young, I try to make sure I remember that family's not always going to be around. Make sure you take advantage of them while they're here. Not take advantage of them. Take advantage of the time you have with them while they're here. something that's really interesting is that I spent a lot of time with people of the more elderly variety, given my pool life that I had, and I learned a lot of life lessons from people who were 3 times my age, if not significantly older than that. With Jorny, you're helping a lot of people of that age group experience more to life. How do you feel it's best for people to experience life at this age? And is there any challenges you've faced as a company? Mm. Yeah. 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 Realize their potential. I had the same situation when I taught water aerobics for so long that I would I would try to convince them like, hey, you can do this. And even if it's hard at first, even if you're struggling to do just a few reps of a certain exercise, give it a couple weeks, you'll do 10 reps. Month after that, you'll do 20 reps. And it just takes a little bit of time. They forget that there is a beginner's curve, the beginner's cup, if you will. And you have to fill that up, or you have to level up before you can get good at it. And it's okay to not be good at it. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. One thing I really think a lot of older people really need to try is video games, for example. And not only is it good just for the brain, but on top of that, just having those experiences. I'm sitting here going through Mass Effect trilogy for the second time of my life, and sitting there playing this game, being immersed in that world, seeing the characters that I've learned to care about either die or succeed. It's a very visceral feeling that you get from playing these games. And it's like reading a deep book that you really enjoy, having that attachment to that story. And video games give you that visual as well. And I think a lot of elderly people and people just of all ages could benefit from being immersed in those worlds. I remember a story. This probably came out when I was in high school, so over a decade ago. But it was a story about how a grandson showed his grandfather Assassin's Creed 2, which takes place in the Italian Renaissance of Italy, essentially. Da Vinci was in the game and everything. And the grandpa, instead of exploring the city or really like playing the game how it's supposed to, he got into one of the little canoes and just started sailing through the city, seeing it that way, and just sitting there enjoying the views because it's a beautiful looking game. And I thought that was a unique way of just experiencing that world. And I'm seeing now too, there's a lot of older people who are becoming Twitch streamers, for example, too, which is really awesome. Mm. Mhm. Yeah. I like that. And it's one of those things too where there's a lot of bridging that the younger generation could help teach the older ones and vice versa. Speaking of different generations, how has being a parent changed your life? Mhm. father. Yeah, I love that. What do you have coming forward that you're looking forward to? Mhm. Hmm. Market share. Yeah. Interesting. And it's a interesting journey ahead of you there that you're going to be able to explore and figure out how to go about it. If people are interested in you or in Journey, where can people find you online? Yeah, I love that. I got a link in the description for you, so no worries on that. What would be a good? That's a good call to action for people to do. What would be a good call to growth for people to do to grow in their lives? Mm. Oh, I love that. That's awesome. I didn't know you had that tool. Well, this is Dustin, PolyInnovator, and Itamar Bar, the global citizen on the Polymath Polycast. Thank you for being here. It was good. Hello and welcome to the Polymath Polycast.